joining us today. My name is Christy Scanlon, and I am the Employer Relations Coordinator in the Career Center at Grand Valley State University. And we have a really great session planned for, hold on, I'm admitting more people, for all of us today. So this is in partnership with the West Michigan Internship Initiative. And this was a summer of many, many transitions in many different areas, and internships were certainly a part of that. So welcome to Lessons Learned, the transition to remote internships. I'm going to introduce my friend and colleague, Cindy Brown. Cindy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Christy. Welcome, everyone. It's a great day, but it's also 6 months since the start of the pandemic. And you can talk about, you can kind of say new normal, new future, post-pandemic, phase 6 of the My Safe Start Plan, whatever we call to the end of this, and whenever it happens, is going to be totally different. And I think the one thing that we all have to acknowledge is that the time after this pandemic is going to be different. And we need to acknowledge that there's going to be hybrid work, there's going to be 100% remote work, there's going to be 100% in office work, there's going to be all different types of work that's going to be acceptable going forward. So I'm beyond excited to hear about the best practices and challenges that our panelists are going to talk about today, because they pivoted very quickly. We've got 2 great companies that changed the direction of their internships when this all occurred. And we've got 2 great interns that actually participated in internships this summer that were different than what they probably thought of when they were interviewing last year. So the West Michigan Internship Initiative, like Christy mentioned, is made up of the local colleges and universities here in West Michigan, along with Hello West Michigan in the Right Place. And we've actually been facilitating trainings since about 2009, and these trainings are free. And we're going to continue to facilitate these trainings once a month, hosted by one of the fabulous career services offices for one of these West Michigan colleges and universities. And you'll find that information on our websites, all of the websites that were posted. And please feel free to encourage any level of management or any supervisor in your organization to attend, because these students are going to need great opportunities. And we're here with these great panelists to share the best practices of how you can do it.
Great, thank you, Cindy. So with that, we're going to jump right in. I have a few Zoom keeping items to share with you. If you could keep your microphones on mute during the session, that would be helpful. It is your choice if you want your video showing or not. Of course, we love to see your faces. We are recording this session, and it will be sent out with the PowerPoint presentation as part of the follow-up email you'll receive from me today. And we will be doing some Q&A towards the end of our time together today. So if you have questions during the session today, please put those in the chat, and I will be monitoring that throughout the time. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to the first star of our show today, Darius Pimpleton with Our Daily Bread Ministries.
Well, hello. I think it's the first time I've been introduced as a star. So thanks so much, Christy. I appreciate it. And thanks for everyone for joining us. Just quick little bit about me. I've been with Our Daily Bread for about a little over 2.5 years. I came in as the person to manage the internship program, and about 6 months later, I found myself doing all of the hiring for the U.S. office. So you can imagine we've been busy for sure, but it's been great. If you're not familiar with Our Daily Bread, just a little context for what I'll be talking about here. We are essentially we're a Christian nonprofit. We're best known for the daily devotionals that we print. Small that you'll find them at your churches, and honestly, sometimes the most random places. But we do quite a bit more than that outside of our publishing side. We have a film department. We have online learning. We've got print production. We do a lot of printing at this office. And we're an international organization. We have offices in about 36 countries. So we stay busy. Luckily, I don't have to do any hiring for those offices. But I just do the hiring for the internships for the offices here in our Grand Rapids office, where we have about 280 employees. So we stay pretty busy. But as far as our internship program, we you can imagine how many areas I get to hire in being a kind of a communications organization. So we hire web developers for interns, film interns, social media interns, marketing and outreach, print design, digital design, publishing, and HR. So those are kind of the areas. It's a pretty wide variety of internships we hire for, which keeps it interesting and it keeps it really fun, actually. As far as our internship program, we look at it really as one part deliverables, fulfilling the deliverables, and one part development, kind of a 50-50 proposition there. In equal parts, we really want the students to develop, and we want to provide those opportunities. And we don't do internships that are wait by the printer and grab some coffee. It's really meaningful work, and we want to convey that to the interns. So when the COVID really hit hard and we had to go to remote, we started having some serious conversations. Actually, before that, like, are we going to do the internship program? And luckily, our leadership allowed us to keep going. We didn't want to take that away from the folks that we had already been interviewing. We pretty much filled all of our internships remotely, which is something that we've never done. We ended up with both on-site and remote interns. We have never done that. I've asked my boss before, hey, can we do remote interns? No, we don't do that here. And the reason is because we put such a heavy emphasis on culture, because that's very important to us, and that's a lot harder to translate in a virtual environment. So we definitely had to adapt really quickly, even from an onboarding standpoint. We never really onboarded anyone completely remote, because all of our jobs are pretty much in the building here. We have a few remote customer service representatives, but they still come in the building once a month. So for meetings, they're in the area. So other than that, we really didn't do remote. So we really had to figure out how to first go paperless. It was a real thing, and I'm really, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, because we really needed to do some of that anyway, just from an efficiency standpoint. And we did that with, IS helped us definitely quite a bit with making some of our forms fillable, but also adding to our some of our systems to do some of the paperless onboarding, just adding to those accounts to allow us to do that and be more efficient. And that's just from a human resources standpoint. So one thing that really helped us was looking at it through the lens of what the team was already doing, that they will be working on. Teams were remote. I've never seen the building this empty and black, and dark when I would come in every once in a while to do some things just in the office. And it was really eerie, actually, because there's usually so much going on. So we really looked at what the teams and got with the hiring managers and kind of walked with them as far as onboarding and the intentionality that they had to take with being a remote team and onboarding remotely. Some of those systems were already in place and processes for the individual teams, which is great, but they had never onboarded a new employee and kind of brought them into that team culture. So it definitely took some intentionality on their part, and several meetings on my part. I'm still tired of video conferences, but it was a lot of them, and a lot of one-on-ones too, because the team dynamics are different. It's counterintuitive to look at IT and think that they're very, very social. That's actually the case for our IT team. So it's been kind of a huge test for them to see if they can maintain that strong team culture. And we had to kind of, again, intentionally with the hiring manager set the expectations, that yes, a lot of us are here because of the mission, and that mission is to make the Bible understandable and accessible to everyone. But people tend to stick around at Our Daily Bread because of the culture. It's a culture where people genuinely care about one another, and like really genuinely, and they really like to spend time. It's a very relational culture. So we had to try to figure out ways to really have that translate, and really create that community in the remote setting, as it says there. So one of the things that some of the teams did, actually all of them, we wanted everyone for the most part on the team to have a touch point with the interns. And we found that, and prior to that, really have say in what the internship looked like on a team level, which we found really gave buy-in from the team members, from the individual team members. So HR, we didn't have to do a whole lot with pushing, and the hiring manager, it took quite a bit off the hiring manager as well when you had that buy-in from the team. So we did quite a bit of that, incorporating the team members. And again, a lot of those teams, the team cultures are very, very different, and we didn't want to dictate a whole lot of things from an HR standpoint to change that. So we put a lot of onus on the team to keep it fun. I know some of the teams definitely, they would set times every week to have virtual lunches, to keep that culture in that community. And I know the HR team did that, even from the standpoint of National Intern Day. From the HR standpoint, we sent handwritten notes to all of the interns. We had 5 on site, 4 remote, I believe, or something like that. And we sent handwritten card with a Starbucks card, just to let them know that we appreciate them and all that good stuff. But on the team level, we also, set that expectation that, hey, this is coming up, because not everybody knows there's a National Intern Day. Not the hiring manager for the design is not going to know that. So we put that on their radar intentionally and said, hey, if you guys can do something just to celebrate your intern, that would be great. And that took the form of, for the on-site interns, like our film interns, they brought in a bunch of, I don't know if anyone's ever been to this, I think the salted cupcake. So they brought in a bunch of those here in Grand Rapids and really kind of talked with the entire film team, and celebrated them that way, and really saw and asked what they were getting out of the internship. What do they still want to do that they haven't gotten a chance to do yet? How, in what ways can we help you pass the internship? Things like that, just to facilitate that conversation, and to also kind of reinforce that culture that, no, we do care about you pass the work that you do, truly. So that's one example of what they did. And so we have a team, and they were actually in the building. We had a team, our design team. Let me see, how am I doing on time, Christy? Got about a few minutes here.
Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Okay. So our design team was actually completely remote, and they actually haven't been in the office since. So they on that day, they kind of surprised. They put a calendar, something on the calendar for the intern, and surprised them with a Grubhub meal to her house in Mount Pleasant, which was really cool. And everybody got on the call, and they all had lunch together. And I mean, it was great. From what I understand, I talked to the intern, and she was super surprised, and she loved it, and it was wonderful. So it's those kind of intentional things that we had to do. We paired each with a mentor or a buddy that's not the hiring manager, and that person really was more or less a touch point from a cultural standpoint to help them navigate and kind of help create relationships within the team and within the ministry. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So prior to the start day, as far as communication, I got a lot of calls and a lot of emails from interns asking the same question. Are we still doing this? For even the ones that we hired and they had start dates. And we were very, very committed to, regardless of the next executive order, because that would change. It seemed like that would change everything. Every time there was a press conference, we would have to adjust, which is, it is what it is. I got that question, asked that question a lot, and we really did stay committed to that. I did communicate to them that we may have to be flexible in start date, possibly, but we were committed to at least starting remote. And we gave the option to the interns whether they wanted to be remote or be in the building, because the teams were already working remotely. We knew that there was some sort of structure and process in place for that. It was just, it's more or less a culture thing. But we wanted them to be comfortable in whatever environment. One question that I asked every single intern, hey, do you fall into any of the high risk categories? Because if that's the case, we're not gonna give the option of coming in, because we want to keep you safe. And of course, gave them the list from the CDC, and thankfully none of them did, but all of them really, really wanted to come in. Unfortunately, as I said before, some of the teams, so we could properly maintain social distancing and whatnot here, have remained remote. Like design, they can do that from anywhere. And actually IS, some of them are back, but even those interns, they wanted to be in, so the managers and the buddies would come in with them into the office, because they really thought it was important that even though we weren't at full capacity, that they still had that touch point, especially when they want to be here in the office. So we utilized technology quite a bit. We had to. From an accountability standpoint, project management, I know that some of the teams use Slack and Asana, just so you can track what they're working on. And I'm going to be wrapping it up here pretty soon. And I know as far as onboarding, our IT team used Confluence to communicate that. So as far as professional development goes, we really looked, there are some opportunities within the organization. One thing that I try to do anytime we have interns is make myself available to do mock interviews and to review their resume, because we want them to be successful after they leave here. So in this case, I offered virtual interviews, video interviews, because I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And that's one of the things that we found in interviewing, the interviewing process when filling the positions. It was, you know what, some of these students don't know how to do a video interview. So we wanted to prepare our interns for that, and reviewing resumes and all that. Honestly, I have former interns that will send me their resumes now to ask me to look them over, and we're more than happy to do that. I'm more than happy to do that. So we provide those opportunities. We also set up meetings with employees that are currently working in other areas of the ministry that they may have interest in. So an example of that, a social media intern did a lot of creating for some of our social media channels, images and whatnot. She also had an interest in analytics. So we worked that into, actually we were able to work that into her job. And that's something that we do. We always ask our interns, okay, these are the things that you're going to do, okay? But we ask the question, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do while you're here? Because we want to also provide opportunities for that. So she was able to work with the analytics, and from what I understand, she's doing great with that team. So we were able to add some hours and do that. So I have to do that. Also, something that our managers has done, they've been very good with sharing their industry connections with the interns. And that's not something that we had done a lot of, they had done a lot of, but it's really just because everything is done video. So they find themselves video chatting with, obviously people across the country. So they said, basically, if I can do that, I can provide that opportunity for the interns. Example of this would be our film interns. One of our producers knows folks, some people at Big Idea Media. That's the company that they're best known for VeggieTales. And they set up a meeting with actually one of the higher ups there with our interns, so they could just talk and ask questions. And they found so much value in that, to the point where one of our interns said, you know what, I kind of know what direction I want to go in after I graduate now, which is really cool. That's an outcome that we want to hear. So that's something that we've been doing, that our managers have been it kind of organically just happened because of where we find ourselves. So another one, and I'll wrap up here, is Udemy. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Udemy, but yeah, I see someone giving me a thumbs up. We actually provide access to Udemy, especially for our IS interns. And we'll pay for that, and it's great. Even if it's something that they don't necessarily have to do while they're here, we just want to provide access with that. Our software engineers, when they want to learn a new technology, they'll do a Udemy course, and it's really, really great. So we provide access to that. Even if they don't do it on company time, they're more than welcome to do it on their own time, and really show that they want to develop themselves, since we're providing the opportunity to develop them. So those are some of the things that I'm probably over time, so I'm sorry if I am, but those are some of the things that we have done. One thing that I would say in retrospect, in hindsight, that I would really want to look at next year would be to kind of bridge the gap, the cultural gap between our on-site and remote interns. When they're all in the building, it's really easy to build a culture, but I think that's one thing that I would really look at next year if we found ourselves in the same place, trying to, I think it was a little bit of a blind spot for us. And we had several, so we're all learning here. So I'm gonna wrap it up and send it over to Liz Hamilton, my colleague from Kellogg's, and I will say the newly promoted Liz Hamilton.
Thanks, Darius. Yeah, so hey everyone, it's so wonderful just to see your faces and your names. I know it's been a long time since we've all been in person, but again, it's very grateful to have technology that we can all meet in person. And so again, I am Liz Hamilton. I am our intern program manager over here at the Kellogg Company. And just to really kind of give you a quick introduction, I've been with the company now over 5.5 years. In the last 4 years, I would say I've spent in the university relations space. And so I am one of our recruiters. We are a small but a mighty team. And so it's just myself and my counterpart. And we oversee all of our intern programming and student affairs for the USA for Kellogg's. So again, for those of you who are familiar, Kellogg's is a global company. Within the US, we have around 10,000 employees, and our intern program each year, we're bringing in 75 to 100 students across the US. And so the fun part with this is, of course, how do you shift 75 to 100 students to a virtual environment? And so very similar to Darius's experience early on, early March, we really had to start to get proactive and put together multiple what if contingency plans. I'm sure a lot of us have heard that word in the last couple months. And so we really put together an action plan of how are we going to execute our intern program. Our program is heavily funded from senior leadership, as well as our CEO as well. He's a huge proponent of our program. And so early on, even before we shifted the program to virtual, we were working a couple weeks ahead, ensuring that all of those departments that have interns, that they could support a virtual experience. And so I would say what you'll hear through just my piece of this is a common theme is over communication. we were in constant communication, not just with our interns, but internally as well, to ensure that this program could be run successfully, that our students would still gain that real world work experience that we want them to have when they come to Kellogg's. And with our intern program as well, it is a pipeline for entry level hiring here at the company. And so our big rule of thumb is that if we bring an intern in, that we want to be converting them to a full-time seat. Of course, we have students who are eligible for additional internships as well, but it's really the flagship for pipelining entry-level talent. And so anywho, it really started with over communication from the very beginning, just communicating to our students that by April 1st, they would know where our program would stand. We felt that setting that deadline so they wouldn't feel that ambiguous nature of schools going virtual, what's going to happen with my internship. And so we wanted to make sure that that promise was made to them. And so again, we just had 100% support. It was honestly very overwhelming, and just so much gratitude that our company still wanted the intern program. They absolutely enjoy hosting students every year and felt that it would be an injustice to pull that out from our students. Of course, Kellogg's is a food company, and so we were in a very fortunate spot as an organization as well. And so from the onboarding process perspective, once we got the go ahead to do the virtual program, it was really just a series of, again, constant communication, making sure that IT can support shipping out. And we had 86 interns this summer. So shipping out 86 laptops. How do we ship students? We order a lot of different swag for them. So ensuring that they still can receive that and still have that piece of the intern program, that they're not left out in that. And we still wanted to make their experience just as wonderful if they were in person. So from the very beginning, it was making sure that we could support all of that. Again, it was great. Kellogg's had been working virtual for at least a month at that time, so we were able to get all of that aligned. And then it was really just going through the motions, setting up time with all of our managers, instilling in them that there was a strong mentor for each student as well. And even if there needed to be a second mentor to step in with being virtual. And then it really went into how do we make sure, again, we're providing this experience that the students are so accustomed to when coming to an intern program. And so we were able to keep their start date. The majority of our students did work virtually. We only had a small percentage that ultimately did a hybrid approach or a full-time experience, and those were the ones within our manufacturing and R&D space. But ultimately, 90% of our students were virtual. And so we were able to stay committed to their start date. We were able to really lean internally to some new technologies. I don't know if any of you have started to use Microsoft Teams, but we leverage Microsoft Teams quite a bit. We created an internal SharePoint site for our students. And so really anything that we were seeing from the full-time hiring perspective, we wanted to really emulate that for the internship experience. So any of those documents or any helpful information that we could get in front of our students, that was really our goal. And again, we wanted to make sure that they had every helpful tool in the book to make sure that they can be successful working virtually. Something that I have really found surprising, and I think it definitely surprised managers and our functional leadership, is students are resilient. Students were really some of the first ones to be in a virtual setting, and so they really came on board, I think, with a strong fury and a passion to just succeed and do a phenomenal job, and really show their agility through the summer. And so some of the things that we were able to still do in the virtual setting, I would say that I felt as though we were able to execute everything to our full ability. And so we still did an orientation program. Again, did it in a virtual setting. We still had multiple leaders talk to the students throughout their summer internship experience. And then we also did a finale meeting, which was really innovative and fun. So what we ended up doing is traditionally we do a showcase event where all the students can really do a quick elevator pitch, if you will, on what their summer was all about, what their project work was. And so we ended up having to do that virtually, and it was really neat to see the students. They all were given one slide where they had to really communicate quickly what it was that they were up to for the summer. We had over 250 participants on the line. We sent that out also throughout all of the companies. So it just was a really neat way to show that, hey, even if these students were coming on board, they still were given the same project work, the same expectations. And again, they really persevered through. I would love to say this too, is that we tried to keep as much fun as possible with our program. And so a couple different things that we do through that run concurrently with the intern program is we do an intern speaker series where we bring different speakers in to come and talk to the students. So that remained constant. We do an innovation challenge where we ask the students to come up with the latest and greatest Kellogg product. We work heavily with our business employee resource groups, and so they were also doing different mentorship opportunities through there. Lots of lunch and learns and other things as well. And then we have a lot of wonderful internal resources. I don't know if, again, another big one is LinkedIn Learning students could participate in, where they can go out and do and choose from hundreds of thousands of modules to, again, do in conjunction with their internship. And so truthfully, it was a summer that no matter what, it was still a wonderful summer with our students. I think the final piece is just knowing that we had such a strong community. We were all in it together. I know that there were other employee managers as well as career services that I had been keeping in contact with just to notify them that we had students coming on board. We're all in it together. And so it was really great to just lean on one another through that time. And then the final thing too is that there were still opportunities out in the community. I know our students participated in Hello Us Michigan events. As Darius said, we participated in National Intern Day. And so we traditionally do an ice cream social. And so the big thing with that is that we continued to send students different mailings and things throughout the summer, just to know that, you know, we're thinking of them while we're all virtual. And to really wrap it up with the intern program for this summer is that we know that going into 2021, we're unsure of what things are going to look like, but what we know is that we are fully capable of executing something from a virtual perspective. We have the buy-in from our business to continue our programming for next year. And so for any students too, I would just say that, you know, continue to persevere through. It has been something that none of us have faced before, but again, when we all come together as one, I think we have really learned and leaned on one another through these times. And so looking forward to the Q&A portion, but I am going to wrap it up and I am going to pass it over to one of our students now, Miss Julia Naranjo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Naranjo. I'm an incoming junior at Grand Valley studying computer information systems, and I was the IT data center intern at Spartan-Nash this summer. So given the audience, I'm sure everyone knows who Spartan-Nash is, but just in case, Spartan-Nash is a grocery store retailer and food distributor based in the Grand Rapids area. So the onboarding process, I'm going to mention specific ways that Spartan-Nash communicated with me throughout the summer, but in general, they did a great job of communicating from before my first phone interview to the last day of my internship. And this communication was especially important during the interview process, which actually was a very unique experience for me, at least. So most Spartan-Nash interns were hired in the fall, but the person who was originally hired for my position actually backed out of the offer. So I had an interview set in Byron Center at Spartan-Nash headquarters in March. And that was when everything started going on, and I was forced to move home 3 days before my interview because I lived in an on-campus apartment. And then 2 days before the interview, Spartan-Nash switched my interview to a virtual setting, which was good for me because at this point I was living at home in Kalamazoo with my parents. And so I actually did my interview from my parents' bedroom because that's where the Wi-Fi was the best in my house. Within a week, my interview experience had completely changed from the idea of an interview that I was used to preparing for in an office, like shaking hands, to an interview quite literally from my parents' bedroom, which was completely unfamiliar. And then by the time I was hired, Spartan Nash had not mentioned anything about a possible virtual internship. And so that was a challenge because I didn't really know how to approach the internship. I didn't even know if it was going to happen at the time. I didn't know, nobody really knew how long the pandemic was going to take at the time. And so this caused some challenges because at the time of my offer, I needed to take a drug test, which consisted of me going to an urgent care facility during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this raised concerns for me and my family because I lived in a household with my grandma who's considered at risk. And at this time, HR wasn't sure if they were able to postpone or void my drug test. So for a couple days, I was actually fully prepared to give up the internship altogether because I didn't know what was going to happen. And then obviously everything worked out. So I'm really grateful for the flexibility that Spartan Nash provided. And it was obvious throughout this whole process, which was very confusing to me, that Spartan Nash really did care about their interns, which helped me through the process to know that it was a good fit. And then before the internship started, before orientation, we were all sent laptops, work laptops, and some of the interns actually did not get their laptops by the first day of the internship. But I I just know that it was figured out. I personally got my laptop, so I don't know how they figured everything out, but I'm pretty sure some of the students actually called in to Microsoft Teams from their phone. And that's also one thing is that at Spartan Nash, all the communication was done through Microsoft Teams, and it was really helpful. I didn't really run into any issues throughout the summer, so that was great. And then orientation itself was the first day of the internship. It was very organized. They gave us access to some paperwork ahead of time so we could look at it, but we were all required to submit it within a very specific time period on the first day. And then orientation consisted of scheduled Zoom calls where each meeting was taking care of something else, whether it was paperwork or orientation videos. So this way, throughout all of orientation, we could easily ask questions in the Zoom call if we ran into issues. And then professional development events, it was a great professional development program. I just have to say that. They were all scheduled from before the first day so that we could work our individual internships around them, which I thought was really nice. These events included executive speakers from all different areas of Spartan Nash. We did a business etiquette lunch where we learned how to act in more formal business settings. We also did a resume workshop and virtual volunteer work. And then my favorite was actually a virtual escape room, which we did for team bonding between the interns. That was really cool. I didn't even know that that was a thing, but I had a lot of fun. And then outside of the actual professional development events, we were given managers and mentors who we would report to for the rest of the internship. And my manager and team definitely made me feel like a part of the team. And the youngest person on my team was probably 50, and I'm 20 years old. So it was definitely important that I felt like a part of the team, and they did a great job at that. So since they'd all been part of Spartan Nash's team for a really long time, it seemed like they'd been kind of doing the same thing for years. My manager even mentioned some documents that he wrote 30 years ago for Spartan Nash. Um, they made sure that my project allowed me to work with new software so that I could put that on my resume and I could learn that. And so that was really a great experience, especially because they made sure to take the initiative of seeing what I wanted to do, what I wanted to learn, and they were able to work that into my internship, which was great. And then check-ins, we were given suggestions to have weekly one-on-ones with our manager to cover any questions that we had about anything throughout our week. I thought that was really helpful because sometimes I forgot I had questions and then I would go to the weekly one-on-one and I would ask questions for a straight hour. And then we also had weekly check-ins where we would send in an Excel sheet to our managers where we would rate our week on a scale of 1 to 10. And this also included performance check-ins at the 6-week mark and the 12-week mark, where we had to discuss our goals. And we were also working on company culture. So before I get to that part, we were given suggestions before our internship started to research the company values and the mission statement. And so during each of the performance check-ins, we had to rate ourselves based on whether we felt we were upholding those values. And that was really helpful because those core values were in the back of my mind throughout the internship. And so as I navigated everything and did my personal internship, my personal project, the core values were still in the back of my mind. So that was really helpful. Okay, so that's my story. Thanks for listening. Please feel free to ask me any questions at the end. I'm going to pass it on now to Brendan Streelman.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thank you, Julia, for the introduction. I'm just going to start with a little bit about me. For those who don't know me, my name is Brendan Streelman, and I am a soon-to-be graduate of the Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State University. Currently, I'm pursuing my dual degrees in Management Information Systems and Marketing. And just during some of my time at Grand Valley, I've spent the past year and a half working as an SAP ERP initiative intern, where I'm doing things like SAP master data uploads, security assignments, functional configurational testing, and of course, assisting with student errors. I'm also the current president of my university's Enterprise Systems Student Union, or also known as the ESSU, where I'm striving to build student and employer connections and give back to the community of Grand Rapids in just any way possible. And on top of the ESSU, I'm also an active member of the American Marketing Association, as well as the Delta Sigma Phi fraternity. And kind of on a less professional note, I've spent most of my free time this summer just hanging out at the family cottage, just sucking up some sun rays, getting that good vitamin D, and as well as pursuing my solo skydiving license out in Grand Haven, Michigan, which has been a fantastic time for sure. So now that I've shared a little bit about myself, I would like to kind of transition over to my virtual internship experience. So from late May to early August of this summer, I had the pleasure of working remotely for Eli Lilly and Company as an SAP Financial Data Governance intern. And just for those who don't know of Eli Lilly, they are a global research, development, manufacturer, and distributor of pharmaceuticals across the world. So before I go into the details of this experience, I want to touch on the communication aspect of my onboarding process since, well, in October of 2019, when I accepted an offer with Lilly, a virtual internship was not in my mind at all. And quite frankly, I don't think it was on anyone's mind. So flashing forward from October of 2019 to early March of 2020, I received a phone call from my recruitment organizer at Lilly, and he was just kind of updating me on my internship details. It was at this time that I was told that my internship was in fact a go, and that Lilly was going to honor the same salaried offer that I was given last October. And it was also at this time that I was informed that the internship very well could be remote and that I should be prepared for this change. And in all honesty, this was just a huge sigh of relief because with all the craziness of the world at the time, I was definitely questioning if I was going to have an internship at all. So come early May of 2020, this was a few weeks before my internship date, I had a Skype call with a handful of individuals that I had met in my onboarding process that are currently working at Lilly. And this is when I learned that my internship was officially going to not take place in Indianapolis at the company headquarters, but would instead take place right here where I'm standing now in the comforts of my home in Grand Rapids. So during this call, I also got kind of a brief overview of the project that I was going to be working on. And I really like this because it kind of allowed me to do some pre-prepping before my start date. And it was also around this time where I was informed that I would receive a computer. So I received a computer in the near future. And within that box, I get some notes on how to set up my computer and the steps to take before the first day. And also they included a nice, help desk number that I could call if I had any problems getting logged onto my computer. So with that, I do want to wrap up the communication aspect. But before I move on, I want to give a huge shout out to Lilly for being extremely proactive with their communication in the months leading up to my internship date. Because, this really meant a lot because I didn't have to really worry about the loss of employment over the summer. So moving on, I now want to touch on how connections were facilitated in this remote setting. So in the first week of my internship, I was involved in a handful of webinars with the rest of my interns in the division. And this, in my opinion, was a really easy way to get all of us interns on the same page just right from the beginning, especially since we were all from different geographic locations, some in different parts of the world in this case as well. So on top of these larger webinar groups, I also had a ton of smaller Microsoft Teams meetings where I kind of got to just introduce myself and get to know the people that I was going to be working more closely with over the months to come. And then taking another step down from those Teams meetings, I also had a handful of one-on-ones with my supervisor specifically. And these one-on-ones started with, having them a couple times a week, but they kind of opened up to once a week as I got more comfortable in my position. And just a note to all the employers out there, I really found that the one-on-ones were the best way for me to build these meaningful connections being completely remote. The challenge with a remote setting is that you don't get those spontaneous random interactions that you would otherwise if you're walking around the office or the campus you're working on. So to combat this challenge, I really asked my supervisor for a list of, say 10 names of individuals from different divisions, from different levels of management all across the organization. And once I received that list, I actually set up 30-minute one-on-ones just with all of them. And then, I would do my research, have a great conversation, but when the conversation came to an end, I would ask, who do you recommend I reach out to next? What do you recommend I follow this conversation with? Who should I talk to following our chat? And this is really, this is like really what allowed me to grow a real connection base while also getting a better understanding of the company just as a whole, which in the end just allowed me to become a more well-rounded employee. So on top of these one-on-one meetings, I also really enjoyed the intern social gatherings that were held every other Friday afternoon or so. And these meetings were, things that involved like trivia night. We also did an art competition remake, and it was just a ton of fun. But, the real opportunity to connect with my fellow interns came with a 5-day case study that Lily ended up putting on. And I really can't go into the specifics of this case study, but I can say that spending 5 days working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with 4 other interns just collectively working on the same goal really allowed me to build just real relationships despite the lack of our in-person interactions. And these 4 interns were actually the ones that I ended up staying in contact with the most throughout the rest of my time at my internship. So with that being said, I do want to admit with the junior case study aspect, it was kind of tough. We had to use Microsoft Teams to collaborate, and that was a bit laggier than Google Slides does as a student at Grand Valley. So now that I've covered connections, I do want to discuss the culture and the community in a remote setting at Lilly. And when it comes to culture and community, I learned that Lilly doesn't hold anything back. Lilly's a company that truly puts its employees first and wants everyone to feel accepted and equal. Lilly offered a ton of opportunities for interns and as well as full-time employees to join ERGs, which are employee resource groups. And since we couldn't meet in person in our ERGs, many ERGs at Lilly actually just offered informational webinars that appeared on everyone's calendar. So regardless if you applied to join the group, you got an opportunity to kind of learn about the resource group. And they were optional, but I was sure to attend every one I could, just so I could get a better view of all that the Lilly community has to offer. So in addition to the employee resource groups, I was also beyond thrilled with the IndyFluence events us interns were invited to. And IndyFluence, for those who don't know, is a sponsored program by a handful of companies that just call Indianapolis home. And the goal of IndyFluence is to build connections between the interns, the employers, as well as the community of Indianapolis as a whole. So the point of this, being a Grand Rapids local my entire life, having the opportunity to move to Indianapolis for my internship was going to be a big moment for me. And then with the switch to remote, that aspect was quickly taken away from my experience. But, thankfully, the IndyFluence program really gave me some insight to the community of Indianapolis by just putting out a few speaker series that included professional athletes and influential leaders that currently call Indianapolis home today. So moving on, I do want to take the rest of my time to just discuss professional development, as well as some of the recommendations I have for employers that plan to have a remote internship in the future. So before going into the details, I do want to say that personally, from my perspective, having a project that I could see from the beginning to the end was just huge for my engagement over the summer. it also really allowed me to feel complete when my internship came to an end. And then, of course, getting to present on my project at the end of the internship was just huge for my development professionally. And I cannot stress enough to all the employers out there, make your interns do a final presentation. This allows them to discuss their work and also share some of the experiences over the summer or whatever time frame the internship may be. And this is, of course, it's pretty stressful for interns, but it's super important for our development in the end. And then I guess on top of the presentations, employers be sure to set up a ton of touch points early on in the onboarding process and of course in the first weeks of the internship. Joining an organization is hard, not to mention joining completely remotely. And lastly, employers, don't forget to include webinars or speaker series that involve conversations about the city in which your organization resides. Students transitioning into the workforce are of course looking for a company that matches their values, but they're also looking for a city or a community that best fits with their interests of life. And with the switch to virtual remote work, this can be a pretty tough point to cover, but I promise you it'll make a world of difference to the interns who are considering you for a full-time position in the future. And I have a ton more that I could talk about. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, set up some time we can chat in the future. But from here, I will pass it back on to you, Christy. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you to all of our presenters, Darius and Liz and Julia and Brendan. I was fast and furiously taking a lot of notes. You all said such wonderful things, and what I'm hearing as a consistent theme is communication, frequently, often, early, constant, over communicating. That was the approach our employers took, and that was definitely appreciated from our interns as well. The other thing I love hearing is the fun and how important it was for our employers to realize to keep that fun piece, and how much the students enjoyed it, like Julia and your virtual escape room, and the what else did you say? The etiquette lunch and the National Intern Day, sending them handwritten notes with Starbucks cards. Who doesn't love that? So that was really, really great. I learned a lot from you, and I'm guessing that all of our participants did as well. At this point, I'm trying to monitor the chat. We do have some questions that are coming in. Some have been answered already in the chat. One question was about exit interviews, and it looks if employers are conducting exit interviews with interns to get some feedback. And it looks like, Darius, you are doing that next week, and Liz, you did that. I know we have employers who hosted remote interns this summer also participating. So if you want to pipe in and share some of your tips as well, please enter that into the chat. Looks like lots of people were taking notes. I do have a question that I would like to pose to our students. So Julia and Brendan, I'm going to have you unmute yourself. I'm wondering what you could share as your biggest growth area that the biggest challenge you had this summer, and what kind of forced you to grow in an area of your professional development during this remote time.
I can start. So first of all, great timing, because that also just popped up in the chat. I'd say my biggest challenge was networking. I personally love getting to know people. I love talking to people, but it's hard to physically reach out when you're virtual, because you have to make that step and you have to find their name, find their information, contact them. And it's just a lot more work than in person if you were to just walk up to them and say hi. So that's personally a piece that caused some disconnect for me, because I did want to get to know more people, and at some point I just completely forgot about it. But yeah, I think it's very helpful to just reach out to people, just get over yourself, send them a hi, send them an email, just anything, as long as you take that step.
That's great. Thanks, Julia. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, there's a handful of challenges. I completely agree with Julia with the connection issue, especially with my fellow interns. I mean, building relationships with interns is a huge part of your summer experience. But I guess in my unique case, being interning for a company that was actually in Indianapolis, I kind of felt like I lost on the aspect of the city. I mean, I had a feeling that I was going to really enjoy the company I was working for, which I did. But I also kind of lost that other 50% is the environment that I would be working in specifically. So I think that it was a challenge for them to kind of portray what it's like to live in Indianapolis when we're all, behind computer screens in our comforts of our own home. So that was definitely a challenge, but I think that's something that as remote and virtual internships, become a more regular thing in the future, companies will have to, start to build the aspect of the city that they're in to kind of the experience overall.
Yeah, that's great. There's another question that came in from one of our faculty members here at Grand Valley, and this I'm going to put out to all of our panelists. It's, what advice do you have for a student who might not be receiving consistent communication or mentoring from their supervisors? So Liz and Darius, I'm going to have you do that first. And then Julia and Brendan, if you could think of some advice you would give that student from your perspective, that would be great too. So Liz, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, well, for one, that's always discouraging to hear when a student has to face that, especially when you're virtual and you can't just go to your boss's office. I would just tell that student to feel empowered to make the move, to reach out. I know so many times it's so intimidating when you have this whole new world that you're working for, but just know that you, when in doubt, reach out. So if you are not hearing that clear communication from either your manager or even the intern program manager or your recruiter, always know that there's nothing wrong with reaching out and just asking for further clarification. Additionally, too, feel free to lean on faculty and career services. Again, there's so many people here that just care and want you to succeed. And so if you ever feel as though that you really are not gaining concrete information, I just encourage you to, again, feel empowered to make that move, to figure out what it is that you need to be doing to be successful, especially being virtual. It's just so tough.
Darius?
Yeah, and I would echo that as well. If it were me, one thing that I would do is I would, as Liz kind of said, take that step to reach out. But specifically, in reaching out, I would just ask for help and say, hey, and provide the opportunity for the manager, because it may be a blind spot for the manager. It doesn't have to be, they're intentionally just not engaging. It may just be a blind spot. So I would be proactive and ask and say, can you please help me put together a development plan or a career path, or just to start a conversation and let them know what you want to learn. And it could be within the internship, or it may be past the internship, but it's an opportunity and it's a way to just start a conversation that would definitely benefit you as an intern and as someone that's going to be in the workforce in the future.
Right. Julia and Brendan, any other thoughts to add? We're almost out of time.
Yeah, just a quick one. My recruiter, first day, she told all the interns, be prepared to feel annoying. Like, you'll just have to reach out pretty much multiple times a day. So
That's great advice.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely echo that with Julia. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, you're starting in a completely different location than what you usually would, so asking questions is the best way to get caught up to speed.
I'd rather know if someone had a question early on versus wait until the end of 12 weeks to hear that there was ever an issue. So the sooner, the more proactive you can be, the better.
Good. That's great advice. Someone real quick also added in the chat, they're looking for blogs or books or websites geared toward professional development for interns. So Liz or Darius, if you have some resources, if you could just pop that into the chat. What I will do is I'll save the chat and include links in the follow-up email as well. So you will have all of that information. I want to be cognizant of time because we are right at 10 o'clock. I'm going to try and get my screen to move. We do have everybody's, there we go. Oh, real quick, we have some upcoming employer events for upcoming employer internship training dates that Cindy mentioned earlier when we started, as well as I wanted to include some of the Grand Valley events, our upcoming virtual career and internship fair that is going to be part of a larger Work Like a Laker conference that will be a 2-week time period in October. So more information on that is included on the link below. Here are all of our partners for the West Michigan Internship Initiative, all of our colleges and universities in the area. And there we go. Our panelist information. So if you would like to follow up with any of our wonderful panelists today, we have this information included as well. For Darius, Liz, Julia, and Brendan, they are happy to connect further if you have additional questions or would like to reach out personally. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for your time today. For all of our employers on the call, thank you for your support of interns and internships and your commitment to keep internships going in this time of a lot of transition in the summer. So thank you to that. So Darius and Liz, thank you for being wonderful employer partners and for your dedication to internships and for sharing the lessons you learned this summer. We really appreciate that. And to our fabulous students, Julia and Brendan, thank you so much for being willing to share your stories, the things that were great and the things that were challenges. I think that is where we learn, is in those challenging times and opportunities. So thank you so much for your willingness to do that. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks,
Bye.
Christy. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Chrissy.
Did you want us to stay on for any reason? I'm
Only
just
because I
curious.
just want to say hi, and you guys were awesome. You guys were awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys were really great. Great, great, great.
Agree.
I know,
Guys,
sell it,
you're amazing.
Brendan. I was like, you sell yourself with all these employers on the line. I love
I
that.
know. It was awesome. It's great. It was,
Are you
gotta
still
head on.
recording?
no, am I? I don't know. Probably.